This has been an extraordinary year filled with too many stresses to count. It's important to your health and to those around you to check in with yourself and others to make sure everyone is okay. This holiday season can be especially stressful, but remember that you don't have to go through any of this alone. There are folks who support you and want to see you okay so that we all come out on the other side of this together. Don't forget that, and don't be afraid to speak up if you need a hand. I'm John Holl, and this week we're shaking things up a bit and doing a year-end roundtable with some writers and beer professionals to toast the end of 2020 and to look forward to the new year. Author and UK pub partner Melissa Cole is here, along with Greg Avola from Untapped and Christopher Shepard of Craft Brew News. But up first, joining me on the phone is Cigar City Brewing founder Joey Redner. Cigar City is the sponsor of this episode, and we thank them for that. And this week, we're talking about Maduro Brown Ale. Joey, I love that you have a brown ale, and I'm curious as to what it brings to the overall brewery portfolio.
I think, you look at the lineup of most breweries, they tend to be pale ale, IPA, some people throw in a wheat beer, sours are becoming increasingly common. But a style that's really sort of slipped into the background is, porters, brown ale, stouts. They're just not as prevalent as they once were. And, even within that framework, they were never a dominant style. I think in the darker pantheon of beers, maybe amber probably peaked with the highest popularity. Yeah. But for me, I always thought that, I knew there was, because I was a malt head, I knew there was a contingent of porter, brown ale, stout lovers. And I just thought if we could come out with a beer that was approachable enough to most people, and the brown ale in that category to me is the most approachable, if we could come out with something that sort of made it an easy segue in. And so when we designed Maduro, the whole point was to kind of get close to brown porter territory, but still keep its feet firmly rooted in the brown ale category. That was the goal. And in that lineup, I think it just, it offers a safe harbor to malt heads like myself that, just don't always have a lot of go-to choices out in the market. I can count on one hand the amount of dark beers that I'm consistently able to get even now in 2020, at my local grocer. So I think what it does in our lineup is it gives us a beer that, quite frankly, a lot of breweries have ignored style-wise.
Yeah. Well, taste-wise and aroma-wise, when somebody pours it into a glass, what should they expect?
So Maduro is going to, the immediate thing you're going to get kind of mild milk chocolate notes. You'll get real low bitterness coffee, a real mild blend of coffee. You're not going to get like those espresso burnt notes. You're going to get just a real smooth, almost like a cold brew kind of flavor, very low bitterness. You're going to get sweet caramel, maybe some toffee notes, and you're going to get a beer that pairs exceptionally well with food.
Nice. Well, we're going to have more with Joey later on in the show, but for now, you can learn more about Maduro and all of the other Cigar City Brewing beers by visiting cigarcitybrewing.com. As this year limps to a close, I was thinking about what usually brings me joy in and around the beer space, and it's getting together with good friends over pints for general business chats as well as a proper bullshit session. And since we can't get together in person, I thought that this could be a good format to bring together some of my favorite people for a chat about the year that was and to share some stories. So on the show this week is author Melissa Cole. Her new book is called The Little Book of Lager, and it's available now where books are sold. Christopher Shepard is the senior editor of Craft Brew News, which is published by Beer Marketers Insights, and Greg Avola is one of the founders of Untapped. I wanted to talk a little business, have a little fun, and generally see where their heads were at as this year comes to a close. So get a beer, get comfortable, and let's have some fun. Melissa spoke to me from London, Greg from Connecticut, and Shep from New York. Here's our conversation. Melissa, I want to begin with you. We're recording this 2 days before it'll go to air, and London, where you are, is back in the news again with a mutation of the coronavirus. People are starting to get a little concerned about that, and your government has imposed various lockdowns and new restrictions. I don't want to dwell too much on COVID, but we haven't covered your side of the pond too much this year. So What's it been like in London over the last couple of months, in the UK over the last couple of months, and what's it like right now?
A confused shit show, to be quite honest.
Well, I mean, that's a global answer.
Ours has been particularly special, I feel. I mean, we've got the highest death rate in Europe. It's just we've got a sentient haystack for a prime minister. It's all a bit of a nightmare, really. Yeah, I mean, it's not been great. It really hasn't. But then again, obviously, you've got to look at the fact that you're still upright. I think it's there is just quite simply not enough support for the third largest employer in the UK, which is the leisure and hospitality industry, which obviously includes also then in the manufacturing side as well, breweries. So I feel like the whole of that area has been completely hung out to dry in some bizarre, misguided thing to keep children in school when they could switch to online learning. And it's just a bit mad.
Yeah, I want to dive in a little bit more to what's happening with your breweries and your restaurants, but I want to turn to Greg just at the top of the show now to just sort of, Greg, you've seen a change in how your users have been interacting with the app over the course of the last year, because people were checking into bars and restaurants, and now they're not. What's that been like for Untapped?
It's definitely different. I think that, when you look at Untapped, its goal was to kind of connect people together, drink kind of socially from the web, but people used it really in the bars and restaurant scenes. That was a primary perspective of where it was used. But as things have grown and the pandemic has grown, crazily out of control here, we've shifted to more of drinking at home. So we added in our Untapped at home venue, which is where people can add, drink from their home location. Everyone can see what you're having in there. We've seen really good success with that. But, I think the biggest changes we've seen is just the consumption perspective of the number of check-ins. Obviously, that's decreased this year because the festivals haven't really been around. That's been a big part of our check-in, counts going really crazy, is that we have these festivals all throughout the country and all around the world, and those are not happening this year. So that's obviously going to bring it down there. And then secondly, John, I would say that, the other crazy thing is that we have a container size or a serving size people can associate a check-in with. And we've seen huge decreases in draft check-ins over the whole year of 2020. I think looking at the data now, only 19% of check-ins that have a particular serving style are draft. Last year, that was close to around 45%. So it's a huge decrease over there. Well, can and bottle, specifically can, has increased, but we're just seeing more and more kind of like, at home drinking, and that is continuing the kind of surge of check-ins, but it's definitely nowhere near where we were last year because of these lack of festivals and breweries being open from that perspective.
Chris, draft is obviously one of the big stories that's been happening this past year, and you cover the business of beer. What do you think 2020 is going to be remembered for in the arena that you're covering, that you're specializing in and focusing on?
Oh gosh, that's a real difficult question.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah, I know. What it's going to be remembered for, well, strangely, it's going to be remembered as what it feels like inside of it, at least, is a little bit of a tipping point year where sort of structural changes within the industry are shifting quite a bit. But the weird irony is, top line, overall, big picture, we're going to end up in a lot of, it feels like at this point, most of the way through the December, that it's going to end up with a lot of the same macro trends that we've been watching over the last few years, which is, total volume essentially flat, slightly down, but not way off. We're, the biggest players losing a few share points to smaller players that have focused on higher end segments and styles. But I think that inside of that, right, we're watching, Mark Anthony, which is Mike's Brewing, or Mike's Hard Lemonade Company.
Yeah, that's White Claw.
And Boston Beer, right, which is Sam Adams, but mostly now Truly. Right, we're seeing those two companies, which are the leaders in hard seltzer, just sort of get a lot more of that share. That share used to sort of shed by the biggest players, used to split between, basically Constellation, the Mexican imports, and smaller players and Craft. And over the last couple of years, we've watched how Mike's and Boston have been really taking on, and this year it's all about them. So it's this really weird irony that's going on where there's so much pain and devastation that we're watching on the news all the time, that's happening in the world, and that one major part of the industry, the restaurant and bar sector, is having an incredibly tough time. And as Melissa said, like, there's just not been anywhere near enough support for them here as well. We're seeing smaller brewers who sort of function more like that being sort of rocked to their core. But we're also seeing, huge success for a smaller group of companies that are not the really big ones. Just a huge amount of shift to at-home consumption, which has been a huge boon, not only for those sort of off-premise retailers like the supermarkets and the convenience stores, but a lot of beer wholesalers are having a really good year too, because they don't make so much money on draft distribution, but they make quite a bit more drop-in cases at those big off-premise outlets. So it's a very strange, mixed universe of results.
It's been a while since, maybe about 2 years since I've actually been to the UK. So I haven't had my dose of pub culture in quite a while. Melissa, are people drinking hard seltzers where you are? Do people care about them?
Not really. I mean, they seem to have taken a bit of a hold in big multiple retailers, so supermarkets, but not really. It's interesting. There's been people who have sort of been flinging money at it, and White Claw's made its way over here, and there have been some genuinely not horrible independent brands launched, but it's not. I've got to be honest, I did think it was going to go, and it doesn't seem to have done. I don't know whether that's because everybody's holding their powder and they're not putting in above and below the line marketing strategies at the moment, or whether it's just because, actually, to be honest, we had a lot of what we called alco pops. I don't know whether it was the same. And
cider has always had a pretty strong toehold in your market.
Yeah, so I mean, craft cider still is having a bit of a moment in the sun. And long may that continue. There's some astonishing products coming out, but there's a real sort of there's not really a look for that sort of thing. We've always kind of had a cheap undercurrent of that kind of stuff anyway. So whether that's like bad, sort of rubbish, very heavily flavored ciders, sort of really sort of the milkshake of the booze world, of things like Copperberg, strawberry and banana and things like that. And if you're a teen entering the booze market at the first, none of us like single malt whiskey straight out the gate. So it's an easy in for them, but it doesn't seem like that lasts much into adulthood for a lot of people. So it's a very short term marketplace here.
I feel like if this was taking place a year ago, we'd still be talking about hard seltzer as sort of the next, as one of the big dominant stories, at least here in the US. So it's interesting to see that the needle hasn't moved too much. Greg, can people check into hard ciders on Untapped? Hard seltzers rather. I'm sorry. Is that something that you allow people to do?
We do. We have allowed it from the very beginning. We just never gave them a style preference or style. We put them under other or other, other types in there. But Yeah, they've been able to check in to hard seltzers from the very beginning, and now they're kind of categorized and officially on there as an option. In the U.S. and internationally, there are a couple of our friends that don't really consider this, and I'm sure, Melissa, you have your own take on this, but in the U.S. they're kind of marketed as in the same line of vein as a beer product. So you go to a supermarket or you go to a liquor store, they're literally like right next to each other in terms of this. So we consider them to be part of the kind of the beer category from that perspective, at least in the United States. So yes, and we're seeing tremendous growth in terms of check-ins on there. It was insane to see that growth over the last, in the summertime, and continuing to go on into the wintertime as well.
Are there numbers associated with it? I know you guys have been putting out all sorts of different fun stats around this time of year. Is there any sort of growth that you can point to as to, because I feel like at some point with hard seltzers, there was, like serious beer drinkers were like, oh, I'm not gonna drink that. That's not gonna be for me. And they were sort of hiding it. Or had a disdain for it, and then eventually you tried it, and I was one of those people, and I enjoyed them over the summer. I don't know if I'd check into Untapped on them or fully share on Instagram how many of these I was drinking over this. Like, are you seeing that? I guess people aren't shy about this.
Yeah, they're definitely not shy about this. I always try to compare this to the summer of 2015 and 16, where Not Your Father's Root Beer was like the hit of the town. We saw those extreme high numbers of check-ins across the board. It grew 150% in terms of check-ins from April 2015 to July 2015. And then all of a sudden, it just fell off the earth. And I think that's because obviously there was a lot of controversy with who owned that particular brand, and that got sold to Pabst and things of that nature. But hard seltzers are different. I think looking at the kind of the increase on it, it's not just the check-ins, but it's the brewers that are making those particular check-ins. Now, looking at July 2019 to July 2020, check-ins are up 162% in unique users over the previous year. So definitely a huge increase of check-ins, obviously, as more and more breweries have got onto the table. But it's really about not the users checking them in, but the breweries adopting to that particular culture and making them. We've talked to many breweries on our Untapped TV shows and stuff like that, and everyone's like, yeah, well, we didn't really want to make them, but everyone wants them, so we have to kind of join the line from that perspective. So we're just seeing not only the growth in the user side, but the breweries kind of coming together, making more beers or more ciders and also more hard seltzers to match those needs. There's obviously a perceived kind of like health benefit, I guess you could say, if you want to drink a hard seltzer versus drinking a beer. But I'm not a doctor or pretend to be one, but I think there's a perceived kind of like, okay, it's not as much calories and etc. But I think that also has something to play into the success of the hard seltzers in this time of day.
I don't know. I feel like if I want like my mango or passion fruit or something, I'm just going to go for my IPA these days. I don't need it in a clear fuzzy beverage. But
something I want to pick up though, John, is here's a thing. I was really open about when I found there was a brand called Natural, which is actually without an A in it. It's now rebranded itself to something that I can't remember. And I was quite open that on a hot day, actually, the lemon and lime one in particular really, hit the spot. What is it? And Greg was saying, finally, suddenly you sort of found this tipping point that people were checking these things in. And breweries are saying, oh, we don't really want to make them. But it's like, well, at what point do we just turn around and say, actually, whilst there isn't this kind of, imaginary sacred cow that we have to hold ourselves some sort of standard, or that we don't want to be judged by this. It's like, if a product is good and it's palatable and you enjoy drinking it, what's the issue?
I mean, Shep, you see that firsthand in talking with folks.
Oh, I mean, sure. I have such a weird perspective on it because I've been doing this job, and my way into this was my way into knowing about beer. And so it was really clear to me that actually most folks really don't care. We're the population of folks who are gonna sort of hold up their nose or and sort of look at you askance, throw a little shade, throw a little side eye at what your beverage choice is actually, at least when it comes to beer and the way that we often think about, and that frankly I often think about, right? I mean, I've been known to sort of look at somebody in my past, in my older days, for based on what they're drinking. But I think there's that. I'm hesitant to use the word fetishization, but But I did. I went there and I did it because there's this. We've culturally in the craft segment, right, in the small and independent brewer world, we've I think maybe it's because there's such a honor of the brewer and the brewer's art there, the brewer's art and science, right? So we feel like beverages that honor that and represent that beautifully are the ones that we should care about. It gets slippery really quickly, I think, as you rightly point out, Melissa. Like it ends up getting real sticky and weird real quick. And I actually think that we are at a point where a lot of folks are thinking about that a little carefully. And, maybe we should sort of back off some of the shaming that we've done. And I'll say that I've done.
Oh yeah, no, I was doing that early on, certainly.
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
I was drinking them a lot this summer, and
I mean, I still can't like it. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to shade somebody who does.
What's interesting? Yeah.
Do you mind if I interrupt? Can I just say two things here? One, this is very exciting. I have never actually met somebody who is called Chip in America. This is a wonderful day for me.
I called him Shep. His last name is Shepard, and I called him Shep.
You've just completely shattered.
No, he's not the teacup from Beauty and the Beast. I'm sorry.
We can't do a reenactment. Actually, we could do a reenactment if you would like to. I would be more than happy.
By course, yeah.
But also, secondly, I think that was a really nice way to dance around saying people are snobs in our world.
They are, absolutely.
They are 100%.
I am.
I think
everybody bastards.
Well, if you look at some of the Untapped data, I think that's really where Untapped was started out. I mean, there were other aspects of other rating sites out there, such as Beer Advocate, Rate Beer, when Untapped was started. And the premise of what Untapped is we don't really care what your kind of attitude is around beer. We want everyone to explore beer and figure out what they want, what they like, what they don't like. And I think that's the kind of the mantra with hard seltzer is that, you may not see it as beer and you're like, why is it on Untapped? Why is it still there? But at the same time, it helps bring people into that community and bring more drinkers to the table. And I think that no one can complain that that's a bad thing for the community.
Yeah.
What was interesting about Untapped and, being one of those early users with you, Greg, and then sort of following it over the years is that there are people who are checking in Bud Light there, which is the best selling beer in the US. There are people who are checking in Guinness. There's people who are checking in sort of like these everyday beers where when I first started using it back in those early days, it was, you were sort of ticking off rare beers or, the ones that would make your virtual friends, quote unquote, impressed. But you managed to bring, and I think Beer Advocate was a lot of that, where if somebody, did decide to review Natural Light or something, they were going to get made fun of, or they were going to do it in a tongue-in-cheek kind of way, where you sort of leveled the playing field for people. But it was interesting, Melissa, that you were talking though about the lemon lime one that you had, because the thing that I've seen about hard seltzers this year is people were also using them as mixers. So even though they already have alcohol in them, people are adding shots of vodka, shots of gin, and all sorts of other, ingredients to the hard seltzers for that extra boost. And
I'm not saying it didn't cross my mind.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been in Spain with you drinking gin and tonics at 4 o'clock in the morning. So when you said lemon lime, that's immediately where my mind went was, Melissa's just going to add a little something extra to it. Yeah.
Yeah, please just don't offer me any chocolates.
Well, we can talk about that later on. But Melissa, so amid a pandemic, and we talked about the restaurant industry early on, but amid a pandemic, you decided to become a partner in a proper brick and mortar bar in London and Borough Market. one, tell us about it, and two, please describe in detail just how clinically insane you are to do such a thing.
Yeah, so you should never ever leave me without something to do. I just get myself in trouble. So all my festivals.
You filled the Sudoku book, and then we're like, what else am I going to do? Oh, I'm going to buy a bar.
I've got dyscalculia, so the only thing that you'll get filled with Sudoku is all the wrong answers. Yeah, it's so long and short is that I literally found myself with nothing to do but writing like a twice monthly column for the Telegraph. Well, I say column, it's a food pairing thing, which is next to nothing, and one other magazines monthly, and then some ad hoc stuff, which really I was looking at maximum sort of 2 days work a month. So because I was actually in Brazil when the first lockdown here hit.
That's right. You had left Belgium, where I saw you, and you went to South America. Yeah.
So no, that was another trip.
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. You get around. Yeah.
Oi, easy.
No, I didn't mean it that way. You're well traveled is what I should have said, and that's certainly what I meant. Yes. I've known you long enough to know. Yeah.
I literally landed. I was watching all of the festivals fall like dominoes for the first 3 months that I was going to be back. And also I was supposed to be launching a new book in May, and that got held back to October and all that sort of stuff. And it was genuinely, it was hard at times to really sort of keep my head up and think, right, what are we going to do next? Because there was nothing to do next. And my husband, the long-suffering Mr. Melissa, is, very gainfully employed and has still been working absolutely flat out throughout all of this. And it was just really quite depressing, frankly. And then my friends, Mike and Rich, who run the Rake in Borough Market, which is
it's a great bar,
an iconic beer bar in London. They've also got a beer stand on Borough Market, and they've been there for 20 plus years. And they said, listen, we've had this opportunity now in parts of Borough Market. There are now these outside, for want of a better phrase, static street food venues. And so it's all plumbed in and got running water and draft beer and all that kind of stuff. And they said, do you want to do something with this with us? And it's like, yes, it's going to be so exciting. Because we were told that everything would be over by summer, of course.
Over here we were told by Easter, but yeah. So like fools, we believe people. And so we said, yeah, what the hell? And we got a good deal on it, so we're only slightly sweating things. But when they started bringing in all these varying different restrictions on, because for those of you who don't know the Rake Bar, it's tiny. It's what we'd call a wet lead premises over here. I don't know whether it's the same term in the US, but it just I don't know what that is.
It sells beer and a variety of bagged snacks. And
it's called wet lead?
Wet lead, yes.
Okay.
So you get wet lead and food lead premises. So a restaurant lead premises and a pub that doesn't sell food would be called a wet lead premises.
I mean, I'm just here to provide education. That's why I'm asking. Okay.
There we go. So what happened was that when they started introducing tier systems and all this kind of stuff, is that if you were in certain tiers, apparently it turns out that the virus is actually scared of food. So, hot tip, everybody, is if you're having a pint but you have food, it's okay, because the virus won't come anywhere near you. Sorry, that is absolute sarcasm. Obviously.
No. We had that here it was in California. It was in New York. I think Jersey had it as well. There's a few places that put these restrictions on people where you had to order a meal, and then so people were offering a bag of chips, and then they're saying, well, that's not a meal, and it was tough to sort of keep up with all of that.
Yeah, and all power to the elbow of the Californian breweries who are going to legals, because wineries can apparently can have food, but breweries can't. But anyway, so we went from being able to carefully plan what we were going to do to, oh my God, the rake can't stay open without us providing food for it. So we sort of started to, we've been just in survival mode to keep the rake going. So we've just been getting like pie mashing gravy in from a really good friend of mine, Chris, who's got a company called My Pie. We've been sourcing from one of Mike and Rich's old friends, who's a Borough Market stalwart. So we've had amazing food, but it's not what we wanted to do. So we're kind of in this limbo at the moment with Tier 4 about do we reopen after Christmas? Is there really any point at the moment? Will it just actually be financially better to stay shut? So we're asking all of those hard questions at the moment, but it's been a fantastic ride in so many ways for me, albeit absolutely knackering. And it's been one of those realizations that horrible realization that when you hit your mid-40s, there are certain things that will absolutely end you. And doing a 14-hour day in the freezing cold on your feet, making pies from scratch because the ordering has been screwed up, and making soups and whatnot is it turns out that's a little tiring. Who knew? So that's it. But it's also been really insightful on learning how to manage staff and things like that, because I've been self-employed for so long now that actually remembering that other people, I'm responsible for other people, it's like, oh God, yes, I should probably tell the staff they've done well, or oh God, I'm supposed to have given them direction for this, or so it's but I've got the most amazing support network around me as well. So it's not just me, it's Mike being incredibly organized and very ex-military about things and making sure everything's fine and dealing with the market because he knows how to deal with them, and doing this and doing that, and getting the sort of the lights and the planters and the fridges and the things and that, so that I can do more of the sort of conceptual stuff. So yeah, it's been really interesting, but also just we've turned so many times on this business already, and that I'm dizzy.
I mean, I know everybody's at this place where as we start to think about 2021 and a vaccine being rolled out and sort of getting back to normal, I'm looking forward to visiting your place in person, just so that, one, I can support a local business again, but two, just because it'd be nice to have some sort of sense of normalcy. And you mentioned, sorry.
I think normalcy should be 2021's word. It's like, oh, normalcy.
Well, so you mentioned though that when you started seeing festivals fall, and I wanted to jump to that because Greg, Untapped put on a festival last year, and then two of the businesses that Next last year parent company bought, Beer Advocate and more recently Hop Culture, have been doing festivals and events, and that sort of seemed to at least an outsider on these deals sort of a marquee thing and something that would be good to have, and in a company that deals with the public and consumers. And you were even talking about people checking in at festivals. When do you think, given your insight into these things, when could festivals start to creep back in, do you think?
That's like the $1 million question, John. I feel like I'm going on the record here that everyone's going to hold me against this, but we had originally had rescheduled our festival that we normally have every single year, like you mentioned, to be April of next year.
Which one was that?
The one in the Charlotte
Sure.
Bank of America Center. So we originally were supposed to have it this past year in 2020 in May, but obviously got that pushed because of COVID. We rescheduled that to April of next year of 2021. That's kind of the goal right now, is to have that festival and put it in place. But we're going to take every precaution we have from the guidance from the CDC and make sure that is, safe for people to come. But I will say this: when festivals are going to come back here, there's going to be a lot of thirsty people out there that are going to be jawing for these festivals, as long as it's safe and everyone can be healthy and happy when they attend these things. But I think fundamentally, the beer drinking experience has changed forever. Everyone's going to go now into a bar in the future, and it's not going to be like, people are going to sit far apart from each other. That experience that we all love about drinking next to each other may be kind of changed for the future because of this kind of terrible virus that's happened. Is that you're not, you're going to see people wearing masks everywhere, where before it was maybe a couple people wearing masks. Now it's everyone wearing it, and you're going to have to find come to odds with those situations. But to answer your question, it's hard to say exactly when. The vaccine is obviously going to be providing a lot of more comfort for people to be able to get out there. But I think when it comes down to it is, when can the states and the governments come together and say, hey, look, we're okay with this? Because you look at things like the NFL and other sporting events, there are some states where you see fans in the stadiums, and there are some states we see no fans in the stadium. So it could be state to state in terms of when these festivals come back in, that provides that last minute kind of push forward. But we're hoping that the vaccine is going to help in the future, and we'll see what it unfolds in April, and hopefully we'll have our festival. But if not, we're going to put the health and safety first before we make a decision on that level.
So, Chip, when you're talking to all of the various breweries that are out there, I'm sorry, Shep, when you're talking to all the various breweries that are out there, are you starting to hear long-term planning changes, things that people are, that maybe was commonplace in 2019, for them business-wise, that might not be commonplace in 2021?
Sure thing, Dale. No.
I've got full pronunciation hole. Leave me alone.
It's a lot of the breweries that I talk to are larger and more established breweries.
Yeah.
And so from the beginning have always been in this place of, how do we hunker down, maximize what we're left with and just sort of stick it out until things return. But one of something that feels really lasting is figuring out other avenues of trade. The big one is, of course, e-commerce, right? And online ordering. Tons of breweries where it's legal have figured out that direct to consumer shipping piece. I'm thinking about, here in New York, they cleared breweries to ship within the state. They can't ship over state lines because states get real prickly, and actually the New York regulators get really prickly about other states shipping into New York when they're not supposed to. So they kept it within the state, but tons of breweries here have sort of that immediately kicked into gear. Okay, how do we literally redesign our website to turn it into an e-commerce site rather than a site that basically just tells you when we're open, what beers we make, and sort of why we make them.
Yeah.
A lot of those pivots happened, and now we're seeing a little bit of a moderation where that is combining into existing sort of e-commerce tools that are out there. That I think is one of the more fundamental things that breweries figured out how they wanted to attack that when they were forced to. And that's going to stick around, because I think it's also turned a lot of consumers onto the fact that, like, oh, wait, I can order beer online, and oh my goodness, I can even make it delivered here. That was available before, but there wasn't a lot of awareness of that, or at least some resistance to that. And the second piece that what happens sort of next there is sort of shifting some of the state laws that keep that still restricted in certain ways. And most states have some sort of restrictions on that. Very few are sort of pretty open about. I say everyone, but everyone who is of age and sort of old enough to buy alcohol to be able to buy alcohol online and have it shipped. we're watching a moment where that's changing, right? Where folks are sort of figuring out how do we, for the long term, make this something that's okay.
More with the group in a minute, but first, a note from this episode's sponsor, Cigar City Brewing, makers of Maduro Brown Ale. Aromas reminiscent of toffee and chocolate macaroons belie the low alcohol content and moderate body of this well-rounded English-style brown ale. Semi-sweet chocolate, almond, and brown sugar flavors fill the palate, but quickly dissipate into a dry, clean finish with notes of ground coffee. Learn more at cigarcitybrewing.com. I feel like we've been covering a lot of the heavy stuff and talking about a lot of the more serious stuff. This is airing on the 23rd of December. It's usually a time of year where people try to take a break if you're able to. I'm curious as to food and or drink traditions, probably around beer, since that's what this show is, although we welcome all beverages that are special to you this time of year. Are there things that any of you do on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day that are, I don't know, a little bit of comfort, normalcy, regularity, that you're looking forward to this year?
Oysters. Yeah. So our tradition. So we don't have kids. So we took a view a number of years ago that unless something had radically happened within families, our families live 250 miles apart. I'm aware that that is nothing in US terms, but in UK terms, it's a lot. We don't have a car. Our train companies don't run on Christmas Day and stuff. So we said, no, we're not going to do the whole pulled from pillar to post, we'll close the doors. So we always, if we can, obviously sometimes if a Christmas falls on a Monday, you don't want to be buying oysters 3 days in advance. But we always buy. We could, but
There's a reason that they're on sale.
Yeah, it's like don't buy gas station sushi, right? I mean it's one way you could lose the Christmas weight really quickly. Anyway, sorry. We always have oysters, and I love making the mignonette with creek and red wine vinegar and shallots and horseradish. And we normally have a mixed firm 750, so champagne bottle with that, whilst we're doing everything else.
Nice.
Yeah.
Greg, what about you?
To be honest, I do have kids, so being responsible is probably the only thing I can do, especially now that I have a newborn and 2-month-old. But I think for me is I've always been a huge fan of Sierra Nevada's Celebration Ale. That to me is like the winner in the bottle kind of Christmas holiday. So I always tend to crack a few of those open Christmas Eve. My wife and we just kind of relax, especially with 2 kids. We try to relax as much as we can, and kind of enjoy that and kind of soak it in. But ultimately, it's an odd Christmas. Usually we are surrounded by family. I live pretty close to my parents and my in-laws, and typically everybody's here or there. So it's definitely going to be different this year with all the restrictions in place. But the one thing that's always been a staple for me is that Sierra Nevada Celebration Ale, and by the fireplace, can't get much better than that.
Honestly, I could kill you right now. Such a limited amount came into the UK and in the blink of an eye, and everybody has been going, "Oh my God, it's the best year yet!" It's like, I hate you all. I
mean, Melissa, it actually is the best year yet. The foam on it is incredible. The hop aroma and presence comes through in that classic West Coast bitterness. I've bought 3 12-packs so far this season, and have the 4th ready as well for Christmas and New Year's. So I'll make sure that I tag you on Instagram every single time.
You are
all 12 times.
Yay! Do you have a bleep button for this show, by the way?
No, but you can curse. It's fine. There's when I upload it.
Fuck you,
Well, there's the Christmas spirit.
Ho ho fucking ho.
Shep, what about you?
I'll join in on the celebration love for a hot second, because it's I can't think of too many
so
other.
good this year.
Yeah, it is. I got through my first case, before the first week of December, I believe.
Etu, Chip, Etu.
Sorry. I am also very much getting the sense that I might just be known as Chip from now on. And you know what? I'm not mad at it. I'm not mad at all. I kind of like it. You get tired of being Chris for sometimes. And I will probably grab my second case. Sorry, Melissa. Sorry. Before the week is out and Christmas arrives. You know what is odd to me that I thought of when you first asked this question about tradition? The first thing that I thought of wasn't a food or a drink, but was a glass. Yeah. So Christmas Eve for me is at my parents' house. It will be again, even though it'll just be my parents and my grandmother and my husband and I there. It'll be a much smaller crew than it usually is. But I'm glad I will still be there and will be able to drink a variety of beers that will range from Celebration to probably something Belgian and light, probably something Belgian and dark, certainly something a robust porter at some point. But we sort of go all over the map, the family these days. But I'll drink every single one of those beers out of this really gorgeous, it's got to be a 12 to 14 ounce handled, it's almost like a glass stein, if you will. But it's got this really pretty white sort of tree pattern, like holiday. It's not Christmas, but it's, like just sort of pine trees. Yeah, exactly. And they're just really pretty. And for me, thinking about being with my family for Christmas Eve, I think about drinking beer out of those glasses because it's got the handle. They're nice and thick glass, so you can properly cheers somebody. And it feels nice and solid in your hands when you're sitting in front of the fire. And it's interesting. I hadn't thought about that until that was the first image in my brain when you asked about family traditions of the holidays. So there you go.
Well, I hope you'll pour a Sierra Nevada Celebration into it and tag Melissa on social media.
I'm thinking I might just put that in my calendar now, so I don't forget.
You're dead to me.
Yeah, but I'm like a cat with you. Like, this is about the 7th time that I've been dead to you so far. So I'll punch my card and hope for 2 more times. So I was thinking as you were saying this with like the various traditions and everything, and thinking back to Christmases past, and I imagine all of you had similar experiences at some point when you started writing about beer, when you got into beer, you got into, became known as like the beer person in your family for whatever reason. There's usually that Christmas where all of the gifts that you get are somehow related to beer, and it's people trying their best. It's people trying to, John's the beer guy, let's get this for him. And it's usually kind of like a junky something or other, or something that doesn't really have any great practical use. But it's the thought that counts kind of thing. If you've had those similar experiences, are there gifts that stand out in your mind that you got on that first Christmas or holiday when you became the beer person in other people's minds?
I got one off the top of my head, John, because this is happening every single year for Christmas. Is we have distant relatives that will send stuff. They don't really know me that well. Oh, he's that guy from that beer app, or that some people use around the world. And I got a couple of years ago, I got a Beers of the World pack from a distant relative, and
yikes!
It was like one of those they have these things called World's Market here in Connecticut, which is kind of like a very low class Target or something like that, where it's just like literally a package beer that has like the word beer on the outside, no labels, no nothing, and just says Beers of the World. And you open it up and it's like walking into Yankee Stadium and trying to go to their Beers of the World, kind of thing, which is nothing. It's like, here's your beer from Belgium. It's a Belgian white beer called Blue Moon, and here's a beer from Mexico. It's Corona, and it's just like it was interesting. I appreciate the thought,
and they're all out of code.
Yeah, all out of code. That the labels are falling off of them. They're you appreciate it. You say thank you for thinking of me and thinking of beer, but here, let me tell you how to go to halftime and buy a beer pack or something like that, have a cent or something along those lines. But yeah, it is pretty crazy.
Yikes. Melissa,
I think about the knickknacks.
Yeah. The knickknacks, Chris?
Sorry. Yeah, no, I just think of, which I is obviously broader than beer, right? But because there's so many of these kinds of things, but just the little plastic objects or the number of koozies or bottle openers that are slightly cool, but just not quite cool enough to make the cut in a collection of, dozens upon dozens of bottle openers that I've picked up over the years. I just think about that kind of stuff, which, I feel like something that I appreciate about, the silver lining I'm going to choose to find in Christmas in 2020 is that I'm buying gifts for fewer people, and a lot of my family is doing the same, which allows me to be a little bit more careful and choiceful. And I'm not buying gifts for people that I don't know very well this year, and so it's allowing everything to be a little bit more special. And maybe it'll be I'll be on the receiving end of that as well this year. Fingers crossed. Which I sort of like. I don't. Yes.
That was such a prayer to the universe.
It was. Yeah. Please don't give me crap that I will feel bad about throwing away, but will in fact throw away. Yeah, that's absolutely what it was.
Yeah. Well, what's your knickknack, Melissa?
I've dodged that bullet entirely. I don't know how, but I have. I've completely dodged that bullet.
Really?
Yeah. I think it's partly because having sort of come up through journalism and all of my family knowing that, I'm pretty, they know how it is when you're a journalist, you get sent stuff. And I think a lot of my friends who, because a vast amount of my friends are actually from the beer world.
Oh, yeah.
They already know that this kind of stuff happens and it happens to them. So they don't want to put it on other people. And those friends who aren't beer people just say to me, I wouldn't even know where to start. So why would I bother? It's like, I share the bounty of what I get sent. So they're like, well, why am I going to give you beer?
So that's your nice way of saying that you unload the crap that you get to people.
No, I really don't. I actually am very careful about what I give to people, apart from my next door neighbor who drinks anything. He's unfortunately gone home to Colombia. But so he'll be back. He'll have a big box waiting for him.
I was going to say, all those beers of the world. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get a lot of those on. But yeah, I'm really lucky. I've dodged that bullet. But there is a bit of and at the risk of sounding hugely ungrateful, and I admit that anybody in the beer world who's kind enough to do this kind of stuff, who wants to kick me up the arse next time they see me, is that we do have a bit of a standing joke in our house. It's like, yay, it's got another glass in it, because we have run out of cupboards.
Yeah. It's
but the glass. I mean, if you think that we've gone from like awful Nonics to all of these, beautiful sort of bulb-shaped glasses, and the way that design and branding has gone. So, I really shouldn't. I should find a place for that. And I'm not a huge hoarder, but everything's so gorgeous now that you're just thinking, well, I'm so clumsy, as evinced by the fact I threw myself down some steps at the weekend, twisted my ankle to the point where it looks like Violet Beauregard's, and hobbling about the place right now. I know that I'm going to break a bunch of them. So, having some in reserve is kind of handy.
That's yeah, I've had to stop collecting and bringing glassware into the house. I have two that sort of come to mind though in this vein. The first was a Christmas a couple years ago where we were with my wife's family, and one of her cousins gave me a copy of my cookbook, of the American Craft Beer Cookbook, and didn't realize that I had written it.
No.
And like I was like super confused as I'm staring at it, and
That's
she
awesome.
saw me looking at it, and she goes, well, it's like a beer cookbook, and like I saw it and I thought of you and thought that you'd really like you might get a kick out of some of these recipes that are in there. I looked through it, and like there's some really great recipes, and I was like, oh, and it clicked in that moment that like she was being absolutely sincere, and so I was like, thank you so much. And somebody had to pull her aside later on and be like, John wrote that, by the way, like his picture's on the back. So that was fun. But then a couple years ago, God, this is maybe 15 years ago, my mother-in-law went on a cruise, and I guess it went through Mexico at some point, and she stopped at one of these little tchotchke stands, and she got this figurine, and it's this awful stereotype of like a Mexican man in a sombrero with a big mustache and a poncho, and he's wearing chaps, and he's holding a beer bottle in his arms. And it just says, Mexico or Cerveza or something on it. And my mother-in-law bought this for me because it had, it was a guy holding a beer, and she thought that I would like it. And so I'm looking at it, and I was like, oh, this is very nice, and thank you. And I'm thinking, like, I have no need for this. And I turned it around, and on the back of it, it there's only one nice way to say this. He was wearing chaps and just chaps.
I was actually going to ask.
Yeah. So it's bare ass and bits that are exposed on the back of it. And my mother-in-law, who doesn't listen to this show, to this day still has no idea that that's what she gave me, because if she did, she would be mortified and would just be beside herself every day. But it's hanging on it's sitting on a shelf in my office now, just because it is now one of my most treasured and favorite things, because it's from my mother-in-law, and she meant it in such a wonderful and sincere kind of way. With it being one of the most inappropriate gifts that I've ever received.
I really hope it's constantly facing the wall.
Yeah, eyes against the wall. You're in trouble. Yeah, that's a great idea. Well, thanks everybody for doing this. Thanks for taking time out of your Christmas week to sit and talk about the industry and talk about life and all of that. And before we go, I just kind of want to go around the table, since there is a vaccine that's coming out, and we're looking for normalcy in 2021. Is there a place, is there a bar, is there a experience that you're most looking forward to having in this new year? And Greg, let's start with you.
So the local bar to me called Eli Cannon's, located in Middletown, Connecticut. I've been going there since I met my wife like 11, 12 years ago there. And it got a really tiny tap room. I think most people can understand, like, it's just really, really tiny. And they've been not able to open up at all in this kind of situation. So I'm looking forward to, grabbing my mug off the wall and, drinking out of that mug in that small little tap room once things are cleared up.
Chris Shepard, what about you?
I want, this is going to sound so trite. I want to see you again, John. No, my beer, some of my favorite beer drinking is with beer friends at beer conferences. And, I mean, please, I can't wait to get back into a dance studio again. I can't wait to teach my weekly bar class in front of people in a studio again, instead of on Zoom. But when it comes to, what drinking occasions, what beer moments do I miss the most? It's like, I miss those late night beers after a long day in a convention center.
Yeah. The hotel bars. Yeah.
Just the hotel bars with John Holl and all my beer buddies is honestly the beer drinking that I think the most about, that I've missed this year.
I know that was going to be Melissa's answer as well, but at the verge of not repeating what Chris just said, Melissa, what about you?
Oh no, I'm going to do it anyway. I absolutely want to be in a bar in Spain with you, drinking gin and tonics, watching you do California Love word for word.
Oh, that was fun. 4:00 in the morning, eating gummy bears and drinking bowls of gin and tonics in a nondescript Spanish city. That was one of my favorite. That was one of my favorite nights and or early mornings that I've had to this date. But yeah, I'd love to get back to Spain and love to get back to the UK and just festivals and conferences
I have
and
to echo
everything.
what Christopher said there. I completely have to echo what Christopher said there. Is that really the missing the beer family, and after 20 plus years in the industry, it is family. That is absolutely what's killing me a lot about this. And also, I'm a very huggy person.
Yes.
And my big thank you.
Amen.
Yeah.
My big thing is I just want to be able to hug the people I love again. It's just whether that's family, whether that's friends. I can't bear not traveling. And it is, that's what I want to get back to. I just want to get back to that word of 2021, normalcy.
Well, here's hoping it happens sooner rather than later. Melissa, Chris, Greg, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. And Merry Christmas to all of you.
Oh, Merry Christmas.
Thanks so much. Merry Christmas.
That's Melissa Cole, Chip Shepard, and Greg Avola. My thanks to all of them for coming on the show and for taking the time. And if you have a holiday beer tradition that you'd like to share, head over to The Beer Edge on social media and share your story. And also check out beeredge.com for more content and to sign up for the newsletter. And if you're drinking Celebration this week, a reminder that Melissa Cole is on Twitter at Melissa Cole. And before we go, a bit of housekeeping. Make sure to head over to Facebook and join the This Week in Rausch Beer group because there's always something smoky going on. And if beer audio is your thing, make sure you listen to the Beer Edge podcast with Andy Crouch for deep dive conversations with interesting brewery owners and more. And also head over to beeredge.com, as I mentioned earlier, for articles and to sign up for the newsletter. And every Monday, look for new episodes of Steal This Beer, and once a month, I'll ask you to download the BYO Nano podcast. And please don't forget to subscribe to the show and to leave a review. And you can always reach me via email at John Holl, that's JOHNHOLL, at beeredge.com, or I'm on Twitter at John_Holl. Nate Schweber does the music. He's got a new album out called Gaps. Find him on nateschweber.bandcamp.com, and Jeff Quinn designed our logo. All right, before we go, my thanks again to this episode's sponsor, Cigar City Brewing. And as promised, Joey Redner is back on the line, and we're talking about Maduro Brown Ale. Joey, I've always thought of brown ales as great food companions, and I'm curious as for you, where Maduro fits in with a meal.
Yeah, so Maduro, I think, is it's one of our better food pairing beers. For me, the magic combination is a very spicy pad thai. The offset of that little bit of sweetness that you're getting Maduro, I think it just really offsets the spicy heat. And then you've got the peanuts. Some of that flavor carries over into Maduro, so you get an offset and a complementary note. It goes really well with creamy cheeses. That's a natural pairing for it. It's a strong food pairing beer in our lineup, and I think it has been since the start.
Maduro has also served as the base beer for other Cigar City Brewing beers like Cubano Style Espresso and Oatmeal Raisin Cookie Brown Ale. What do you think makes the base beer as Maduro so perfect for showcasing additional ingredients?
Maduro, when you look at where it's starting flavor wise, you're already getting a little bit of milk chocolate. You're already getting a little bit of caramel and toffee notes, a little bit of nuttiness. It's just natural that out of those things you could build dessert beers or something that, in the case of Cubano Espresso, a coffee beer, because you're sort of already starting with some of those flavors just from the malt. So when you accentuate them by adding the actual ingredients that they're sort of flavor mimicking, it's a natural progression. And not just Cubano Espresso and Oatmeal Raisin Cookie, but we've probably done dozens of examples of what we like to think of as dessert beers built on Maduro, and they work really well because the base raw ingredient that you're working with is it's a great foundation. It's a great platform for those flavors. It really helps to showcase the flavors that you're adding, the adjuncts. But that only works because what you're starting with is what's close to begin with.
Give us the stats on this beer.
Maduro is 5.5% alcohol, very low IBU bitterness. It's going to have a nice sort of dark amber to brown color. It's just a very easy beer to get into, in my opinion.
Well, thanks, Joey, and I'll invite everyone to learn more about Maduro and all of the other Cigar City beers by visiting cigarcitybrewing.com. And once again, thanks to them for sponsoring this show. I'm John Holl. New episodes of this show release every Wednesday, and that's when I'll be back again to drink beer and to think beer. And I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas.